We have with us Loretta Shelton, who is the Executive Director of Four Seasons Foundation, affiliated with Four Seasons Compassion for Life in Henderson County and beyond. Loretta's been in the field for over 25 years, NC State, Mars Hill, and at Four Seasons for a number of years. Besides her role as Executive Director, she's also a volunteer and has a passion for hospice. But I think the key things that she said about in her bio remarks about major gifts work or philanthropy work is this. And as we subscribe to the AFP ethics policies, what's key to fundraising is communication, authenticity, and trust. And I think Loretta and her staff and your staffs all should and can demonstrate those values. So she's going to speak to us about their success, her success in major gifts fundraising, however we define it is however we define it. However, she defines it as maybe a little bit bigger. So welcome, Loretta Shelton.
I will need this podium, so I'm going to step back here and turn this on. If I can remember all those instructions that Jim Brewer gave me. Okay, that works. All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I am really excited to address you all and share some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the thoughts that we have accumulated in the last 2 or 3 years of being at this foundation. Kelly's telling me to speak louder, so I will try to do that. One of the things I could do really well is get up here with 5 minutes notice and talk for an hour without any presentation or any notes. To have me prepare a presentation in advance, create a slideshow, and then try to follow that slideshow a week later, there may be some times when I say, let's forget about that, let's talk about this. So I will be honest about that. One of the important things that I think that I want to share first is that our success has been a very team-focused success. With Kelly Brandon and Tina Bennett, who are in the room today, one of our core values is partnerships and believing and supporting each other. And it's so important to have those people who have your back, who help you think, and who tell you when you have bad breath when you're going out the door to visit a donor. So that is what I want to start with, is that none of this success would be possible without our team. So it's not all about me. In thinking about the success we've had, I did want to share what I feel has been the critical factor of what has given us our success, particularly this year and the 3 years we've had our foundation. And I do believe that it's being donor-centric. And I wanted us to look today about what that really means at different stages of the donor relationship. And there are some people in the room who are head and shoulders above me in this, so I recognize the awesomeness of lots of folks in this room and know that some of you may be earlier in your career or earlier in your positions, and that some of this may be new. So we'll take this journey today. So one of the things about Four Seasons is that we are headquartered in Hendersonville, and we serve 11 counties in western North Carolina. And it's a very well-organized, well-run, 39-year-old organization that for some reason, after a very successful capital campaign about 20 years ago, decided that there was sufficient revenue from events, bequests, memorial donations, and United Way gifts. And so I talked with one of their former marketing and fundraising people after kind of struggling to understand where they were after 40 years in their journey. And it was something that they made a conscious decision of, that they really didn't see the need at that time to spend a lot of time and energy investing in what we would call an annual fund program or a major gifts program. And so I share that with you because you may be at an organization that doesn't already have a lot of infrastructure, don't have formal annual fund programs or a pool of major gift donors. That's where we started. And like most organizations, whether or not you really have a huge pool of donors with major gift capacity, often needs, organizational needs and community needs drives the goal setting. So I did want to share a little bit about where we've come from. When I started, we pulled these numbers in 2014, the year before we started the foundation. Four Seasons received approximately $381,000 in non-bequest donations. We had only one living donor who'd given a six-figure gift, and he had given a very generous donation, $20,000 a year for 5 years. But when we started looking at that pool, there wasn't a lot of people to go visit that we considered the existing major donors. In 2017, we raised almost $800,000 non-bequest donations. This year, we're really hoping to get to $1.5 million. So we've been able to see some growth in that. Now, we do have some capital donations in that, but we are seeing an increase in the number of $5,000 donors, the number of $10,000 donors, the number of $25,000. And I'm very happy to report we also have people who are giving at $100,000 level, $150,000, $300,000 levels. And age-old wisdom in fundraising. Do you know why they are giving? Because we're asking, We're building those relationships and we're asking. I also wanted to take a little bit of a detour before we got into the real presentation, because I do think that we can talk ourselves out of this being possible. That might work for them because they're hospice, or that might work for them because it's scholarships at a college or different things. And so looking at what's happening in the trends, and are the donors out there and are they giving away money? Last year, with over $400 billion in donations nationwide, 5% increase from the former year. The one thing I found exciting about the research that I did, the data, is that donations increased to all 9 major charity areas: education, religion, healthcare, environmental, animals, all the major categories saw increases in fundraising. So I think it's important that we all kind of take a deep breath and say this is possible if we can have the vision to get there. The other thing, not knowing where some of you may be, whether or not you have major gift donors, you may be starting like we were, like, who would we even go talk to about this? There is some fundraising math that we all kind of adapt to. Nationwide, about 88% of the donations are being given by about 12% of the people. So if you're wondering as we go through this presentation, like, who are these people? I suggest that you do what we did. You take the top 10, 15% of your database by the size of your gift, and you memorize those names, and those are the folks you start with. We probably, right now, it's probably even less than 12% of our database are giving over 90% of our funding. So there are people that you can go talk to. The most important thing about this is that it is absolutely critical that whoever those people are, whatever size their gifts are, and quite truly, we have talks often, we say our major gifts, we wanted it to start at $5,000. Well, we looked at that and said, $1,000 is much more probably reflective of what's in our database. We've been having conversations lately about that we probably could dip down to $500 and consider consider those people, because there's just not that many of them right now, and to give them that kind of special attention and relationship is probably the best investment of our time. So don't get caught up in the size of those gifts. The other thing I was excited to see is that for 40% of the nonprofits nationwide, they start major gifts at $10,000. I thought that shows hope for the rest of us that we can get there too. One more little caveat. There is a ton of information if you don't have a major gifts program and you're starting from scratch and you want more technical information, whether it's well screening, analytics, developing proposals. There are tons of resources from AFP, from Western North Carolina Pathways, online, about doing this. That's more technical than what I want to talk about. My passion is for donor relationships. And for that, I think it's not about what's in your wallet. Do y'all recognize this too? I'm guilty. Sometimes I think we can all get too caught up when we think about our donors and we're thinking about what's in their wallet and how much of it would they be willing to give so that we can reach our mission. And so I did want us to take a minute and kind of de-center from that and say, you know, at the end of the day, what's really important is what's in their hearts. And because we're never going to really know what's in their hearts without a relationship, what's really important is what's in our heart. And what we do is sacred. What we do, I think sometimes we work so hard and it's so long and it's so outcome driven that we can get away a little bit from that place that this really is an industry of love and generosity and compassion. And so to help us kind of stay connected to that, we have actually named our Grateful Patient Giving Program at our foundation the Circle of Love. And there's some taglines that go inside this circle that you can't see that say compassion, gratitude, and generosity. Because we want to stay focused as much as possible that that's where our true success is going to come from. I want to try to slow down and talk a little bit slower and say that if y'all have questions during this presentation, feel free to stop and ask them now, or we can do a little bit afterwards. It's really okay to be informal that way. In thinking about the intimacy, and towards the end, I hope to share a little bit about why I phrased it that way, because I don't think donor relationships are any different than relationships, any other kind of relationships. If it's your spouse, your significant other, your children, your parents, your co-workers, there is a certain amount of intimacy that's built upon good communication, authentic communication, and building trust. And if we are going to be in relationship with people and even have the idea that they might trust us with their names on our facilities, with hundreds, sometimes of thousands of dollars, if not millions, or with $10, that it's really important that we are people who value them as people and have relationships with them. Most of you, are you familiar with moves management? I took the assumption that everyone in the room would be familiar with moves management. So, in thinking about how do we really incorporate donor-centric fundraising, and let me tell you, I don't articulate those words together very often, so if I get them all tangled up, but donor-centric fundraising, donor-centric discovery visits, donor-centric cultivation, engagement, and donor-centric solicitation. What does that really look like for us? And I think it's critical that we have relationships at each of these stages that help people share what's most important to them with us. I've been in situations where I've been a little off, and it can almost feel like interrogating someone. You know, you're gathering data and you're trying to figure out, and you're really not like present with them. And so we stop and think about, what does donor-centric discovery look like and feel like? You know, we can get very caught up in how wonderful we are. And we are wonderful, aren't we? We have wonderful organizations that do great work. We give so much of ourselves. And we can go to discovery visits sometimes with donors, and we're assessing their capacity, we're assessing their affinity, their propensity for giving, we're thinking about the notes we need to put in our action report afterwards. And we can kind of fail to think about that the donor is there, the person is there, deciding if they want to move forward with us, as much as we're deciding, is this person someone that I need to meet with again? So if we're going to be donor-centric in a discovery visit, then we need to say, so what's important that happens there from a donor's perspective or a prospective donor's perspective? And there are lots of right answers to that question, but I think one of the most important is credibility. I think in that first initial part of the relationship, that it's incredibly important that the mission have credibility, that it be something that the donor thinks is important in our community. And it doesn't mean that if they don't think that, it isn't important. But a donor-centric experience there, is this something that they think needs to be perpetuated and supported? Is your organization well run? Are the finances in order? Is there good leadership? That kind of organizational confidence that's different than the mission, because several of us kind of overlap in our missions. So why would they support this organization that's doing this work versus another one? But I firmly believe in the discovery visits, they will not go forward unless they also have confidence in you personally and professionally. Because you are at that point the face of the organization and the mission. And they need to see it worth their time to spend time with you, learning what you have to say. So I want us to think about, again, not what's in their wallet, but what's in our heart during those visits. If you'll remember the last face-to-face visit you had with the donor, and if it wasn't with the donor, then with the last human being that you really wanted to have a good relationship with, that you were with, and ask yourself, was I fully present with this person? It is so easy not to be fully present with people. It is almost a challenge to be fully present with people. Did I love and appreciate them as a human being? This is important, guys. You know, if you sit down with someone, chances are that person, you know, we all are underloved, aren't we? And underappreciated. And it doesn't really matter what socioeconomic caliber strand that we are in. Having someone to sit down with you and appreciate you as a human being is really important. Were you authentically interested in their lives, their family, their careers? Or were you just gathering data? we're all hopefully not guilty of this all the time, but I'm sure that we're all guilty of it. I am, some of the time, is that I want to leave there knowing certain things about how to move forward. And it's important that I do that in my role, but it's also important that I'm authentically interested in who this person is and why they might be a good fit for our organization. Did you share enough about yourself to be authentic, interesting, and likable while still observing professional and personal boundaries? You know, one of the most important things that we can do when we're visiting with people is just be likable. You know, it's important. I encourage you to read. I encourage you to have conversations that challenge you mentally, emotionally, and otherwise, to be able to expand, because we know that we might meet one morning with one of our Little Old Ladies Club donors who may give $200 a year, that may be the very person that leaves us $1 million in the estate. Have lunch with an attorney. Usually you go through the attorney's office for you schedule an hour for the meeting, it takes 15 because you sit down and they go, okay, what do you want to talk to me about? Okay, all right. What else? All right, thanks for coming by. And it's a whole different thing. And then you have a couple that invite you to their home and you sit on the back deck and you drink tea and they show you the picture album, and being able to navigate all of that and be interesting to those people takes a certain amount of being able to change and adapt to who they are. And again, we're talking about being donor-centric. We all know those donors who say, someone came to visit me, but they never asked me anything about myself. They talked about their organization and their mission and themselves the entire time until they asked for my money. And we do not want to be those people. The other thing that I think is important at the end of a visit is to say, is if this person were writing the report, the action report, the contact report to go into Razor's Edge, which we use, what would they write? And wouldn't it be interesting if we had a way at the end of our visits, not only to have our perspective, but to have our donors and the people we're meeting with to say, okay, I met with Loretta and we talked about this. I shared this. She was interested in why I moved here, how my children are doing, all the things that are important to that person. Because moving forward from the discovery to the engagement and cultivation stage will depend on you having the personal credibility for you calling back and getting the next meeting and them saying yes. I can tell you what success I've had as a fundraiser is probably 90% based on the fact that I fall in love easily. Because when I sit down with people, I'm like, holy cow, this is the most interesting person that I've ever met. You've done what? You know, and if you love people, they will open up to you and share things with you. Be that person that people say, you know what? I've never told anyone that before. One of the most touching visits, I'll never forget it. When I worked for NC State, I got a referral from a county director in Graham County to go visit his great uncle who had no children and so much money that his great nephew said to me, our family does not need him to leave this money to us. It's too much. It would be so much better if something else was done with this money. He's probably not going to accept a visit with you because he has no public education, doesn't really read and write, and doesn't really feel comfortable meeting with people who aren't from around here. And I was like, you know what? I knew there was an advantage to being from Madison County. I know this man. I've never met this man, but I know this man. So I was able, when I got him on the phone, he came out of the fields from working and feeding his cattle at lunch, where his wife cooked him a hamburger steak, gravy, and biscuits for lunch every day. And if I wanted to visit with him, I could come before daylight or come at lunch. So when I met with them a few times, probably about the third visit, I asked about the children, because they, during our conversations, talked about 2 little girls. But here they were in their mid-80s with no children. Using his words, one of them was born retarded, never spoke, died at about 6 years old. The other had a variety of handicaps and died at 4. But when this gentleman sat on his porch with tears in his eyes and told me what he was thinking as they were putting dirt on his 4-year-old's coffin, and looked up at his wife and said, you know, I don't think I've ever even shared that with my wife. I have never been more honored. It's more important than the gift. It's much more important than the gift. So fall in love easily. Moving on to donor-centric engagement. We have this thing, I think, in our heads where donor-centric engagement is about discovering what part of our work that interests the donor, right? That's what you do. You want to connect what we do to what they want to support. But I think this is another place where we have to kind of step back from there and say, what's in their heart that's connecting them to this? And how do I have a relationship with them that's humble and grateful for their time? But here's where I think I get a little off. You know, how you feel about your organization. If you're meeting with someone who's probably pretty savvy, if they're in a position to be a major gift donor, how you really feel about your organization, your job, your leadership. Is this something really worth investing in? They're going to get that. And they're going to get that through how it feels to be with you and what you say in ways that it really doesn't matter how wonderful you say everything is. So I think it's incredibly important for us to occasionally do what I call a self-check. How am I feeling about this job? Am I loving it? Yes, it's hard. Yes, there can be a lot of pressure. But do I still, am I still tender towards this? Am I still passionate about how important this is? And, you know, there are times and places where if this isn't your calling, you know, we have to, most of us, pay the rent or the mortgage and buy groceries, and I'm not saying go and quit your jobs today, but if this isn't something you love and you don't enjoy being in relationship with people like this may not be your career. You may be called to something else, because I do believe that the space we enter into with people is sacred, and that we have to be very authentic about how we represent what we say to them. We've all heard the saying probably that people don't give because organizations have needs. They give because we're meeting people's needs. So I think in that vein that it's really important, again, to not just thinking about ourselves, but understanding the donor's philanthropic interest. I cannot tell you how many times, because I do feel like I have a certain gift of discernment for sitting and talking with people and listening well and hearing what they're saying and what they're not saying, and ascertaining, like, are they more interested in this program or that program, or why are they giving, and those kind of things. But I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten that wrong either. So one of the first times, I was expecting someone else that was going to try to be here today who knows this story firsthand. But I went with a colleague on a donor visit a few years ago, and they asked a donor for a $12,000 gift, very capable, in line with the giving capacity. And I'll tell you, we crashed and burned. There was no connection in this donor's heart to the purpose we had asked him for. 6 months later, we went back to this donor, and they gave $100,000 very readily for something they did care about. So that's the kind of difference it makes in whether or not finding out, doing your homework, and taking as long as it takes for you to know the answer to that. Another time I worked at NC State, and I visited professors who had retired. A lot of the professors retired and moved to Western North Carolina. So there was a retired horticulture professor that lives in Haywood County. If you know anybody that fits this description, just pretend you don't. But when I went to their house for the visit, we probably spent 45 minutes with him showing me his garden and his flowers, and he was a master gardener. And so, you know, we were forever, and I love that stuff. So I very gladly walked through his garden and did those things. And after, you know, a couple visits, I was very confident that he would probably be interested in giving to the horticulture department or the master gardener, you know, along those lines of his passion. But it didn't take but a couple visits that he kept talking about how much they did to support the school system, and they volunteered to help with literacy programs, and how important education was for people from Western North Carolina. And what I learned, thankfully, before I made the ask, that they were a lot more interested in helping people, helping youth in our area have access to education so they could follow their passions than they were in supporting the horticulture department. One other example, just because I think you can't get a yes. You can get an early no, but I would rather have a later yes than an early no. So one other example, we have someone that I've met, a donor at Four Seasons, retired from a national pharmaceutical company, very involved in the research department. We have one of the most amazing research departments at Four Seasons. We're one of the few hospices in the United States that does research. So I was like, this has got to be a sure fit. And it just, they didn't even talk about it. They were like, oh, that's nice. And I'm like, okay, what gives here? And so you keep building those relationships. But I found out that these folks were very interested in supporting our Angel Fund program that helped provide hospice to people that were homeless and didn't have a way to pay. That the real inside their heart, their interest was helping provide indigent care. But that takes both my being open-minded and open-hearted and being present and listening to people and discerning what they're saying and what it means, because it's so easy to make those assumptions. Okay, a little bit of a rabbit trail here that I think is really important. Isn't it interesting how much intimacy and intimidation kind of look and sound alike? I have heard so many people that work in fundraising and philanthropy say that they can sometimes be a little uncomfortable meeting with people that have a lot of affluence, a lot of influence, that it can be intimidating. And I think it's particularly more so younger in our careers, that you're sitting across often from people who've had very successful careers, lots of money, sometimes 2 or 3 homes, just got back from 3 months in Europe, and here you are going to work, trying to get your kids to daycare, trying to make sure the light bill's paid, and they have different lives often than we do. And so the other thing that I hear a lot, and always have, is fundraisers say, I really love my job, except for that part about asking people for money. Have y'all ever heard anyone say that? You know, it's not uncommon for that to be. I was with an executive director at Philanthropy Institute last week, and she was sent by, and she's lovely. She does a great job, and she said, Lord, I can't tell you, I get the hives when I think I'm about to make an ask. And so here's my 2 cents on that I think is really important. If you give people the gift of your presence, your attention, your love, your appreciation, they are going to be getting as much from this visit. They are going to love spending time with you. It is not about money and influence and all those things. So you need to think about what you're bringing to the relationship, the great opportunities that you have to share with them. The other thing that just puzzles me to death about those statements, if I met with my attorney and he or she didn't want to talk about my legal affairs, I'd be like, why did I meet with you? Or if I saw my doctor and they didn't ask about my health, I'd be like, isn't this strange? Even a financial advisor or someone that does our taxes, if you meet with someone and that's their role, and they don't want to talk to you about what their role is, don't you think people scratch their head and go like, was she just hungry and wanted somebody to buy lunch today? So I encourage you to internalize the fact that you are a fundraiser and these people know it. Yes. These people know what we do. If they say yes to the first visit, it might be out of curiosity. If they say yes to the second or the third visit and thereafter, they are expecting you to ask them for money. Does anyone disagree with that? So be comfortable in that. Be comfortable in that is your role, and that is, they've given you permission to do that. The last part of this is donor-centric solicitation. And this is the part that I think we can get, it's the hardest, and I think it's where we can get the most easily sidetracked. One, people want to make a difference. That's why they're meeting with you. They have resources, they want to use them for good. You are someone that can help them do that. They want to understand what the needs are. So that's why what you say to them in that relationship of trust and credibility is so important. But I also think there's a third level of donor-centric solicitation that is important that we understand and are present with to be successful with these larger donor gift levels. And it takes some real listening sometimes. We have some people that give, and it might be like tithing. They have a lot of resources. They're committed to giving a certain amount away. There's some spiritual meaning for them that's deeper than anything. Their giving is between them and God. But understanding that's part of the reason for giving is important. There are some people who really care about the community being strong and see themselves as community leaders. And so their reason for giving, the reason they get joy from giving, may be totally different than the person who's given from a spiritual place or a selflessness place. There are other people who, they're still kind of out there earning their living, accumulating that wealth, but they don't really feel like they've made it yet. And having the ability to put their name on a building or on a room or on a scholarship gives them a sense of accomplishment that they've been searching for in their lives. And sometimes this level of knowing what's truly motivating our donors, not to give to our mission, not to give to our organization, and not to give because we're so wonderful, but what's inside them that makes them philanthropic is a level of donor-centric solicitation that I think. And some of the large donors that we've had, I can tell you that we've seen that full spectrum. We have, and you may have, one donor that's inherited wealth. Their children and their grandchildren are well taken care of because they have their share. And they don't even feel like this money is their money. They need to do something with it because they're not just going to spend it for their own pleasure. They don't need it. So it's a tool. Another donor you have might be someone who's been a community leader for a long time, and they have resources and they just see this as part of their civic duty. And it's got nothing to do with some of the other things we talked about. Knowing your donors and having the intimacy, back to the communication, the authentic trust that you build. What I say about our work, if you're going to talk to people about the death of a loved one, hospice, and their finances, we don't have anything more intimate in our lives to talk about. And so having a relationship where people will share that with you and that will let you have insight into their souls is the reason I say embrace how important you are in that situation. You and your presence is going to do more to further this cause than all that other stuff if you can develop those relationships with people.
We don't often get to hear, I think, when we're talking about philanthropy and fundraising, we don't often get to hear these kind of words that are so personal. And I can say that Loretta and her staff have brought a whole new awareness in Henderson County and the other areas that was there before, but maybe a different approach to philanthropy than we might be doing every day. But I think you can take all the pieces, parts of what Loretta said and apply them to your own situation. So thank you, Loretta. Thank you to the Four Seasons staff. I know some of you have to leave, but are you willing to stay, or do you want to take a question or two? Somebody have a burning question?
So we're really just not that good at actors. We don't feel it's going to come through, if not the first time, 2 or 3 times down the road.
And your PowerPoint is going to be on the website, or just the video? That's up to Loretta.
We'd like to do that. That would be great. Yeah.
If you're willing to put that, that'd be great.
I tell Mark if it wasn't too horrible.
It was great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for being here.